right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. So welcome to the September 22nd, 2022 Committee for Professional Conduct. I am Dee Dee Owens. So just moving into a few things, taking public comment, we have provided the opportunity for the public to participate via WebEx. When we take public comment, we will ask for comment for here in the room at the CBA headquarters first, and then I'll ask the moderator to open up the line for comments of anybody on WebEx. You will be allotted 5 minutes for public comment. So I'm now going to turn the meeting over to Ms. Reed to establish the quorum.
Nancy Corrigan.
Nancy Corrigan, present.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines.
Present.
Dee Dee Owens.
Present.
Ariel Pay.
Ariel Pay, present.
Joe Rosenbaum.
Present.
And Evangeline Ward.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The CBA's mission is to protect consumers by ensuring only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. This mission is derived from the statutory requirement that the protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the California Board of Accountancy in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. So before we start, I want to let members know that when Ms. Reed calls for a vote, instead of going in alphabetical order, your names will be called random. Please be prepared to provide your vote when she calls your name. All right, so we will move to the first item on the agenda, public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there any public comment from members participating here in the room? Okay, no? So moderator, can you open the line for public comment?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate and are on WebEx currently, click on the Q&A icon, which is a question mark inside of a square, typically located bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And then the text field that appears, type, I would like to make a comment, and make sure it goes to all panelists and click send. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 2 is approval of the minutes from the July 21st, 2022 Committee on Professional Conduct. Members, do I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Let me open up for public comment. Any comments from people participating in the room? No? Moderator, can you open up for public comment?
Yes, the Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen. Click on the question mark inside of a square, type, I would like to make a comment, and send it to all panelists if you would like to make a comment. No request. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 3. Ms. Center, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh.
Thank you. On the minutes. Yes, sorry. Any other discussion? Okay, thanks. Any discussion on the minutes from the members? Okay, call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan.
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines.
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens.
Yes.
Ariel Pay.
Yes.
Joe Rosenbaum.
Yes.
And Evangeline Ward.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Now we'll move to agenda item 3.
We'll try this again. So good morning, Michelle Center, Licensing Chief. The purpose of the agenda item before you today is to provide an opportunity for this committee to discuss and potentially recommend for board approval a regulatory proposal that pertains to early entry to the CPA exam, as well as the transition to a new version of the CPA exam that utilizes the CPA Evolution licensure model. Additionally, you'll find some cleanup and grammatical edits are also proposed in the draft regulations. For the presentation today, I'm going to admit it's a little lengthy, so I'll provide an overview of the early entry and CPA evolution licensure model topics, and then I will go on and provide a summary of the changes in each section of the California Code of Regulations, or CCR for short. Those regulations would either be proposed to be amended, repealed, or created. I will also stop at various points during my presentation to allow members to ask for clarifying questions prior to the end of the presentation where discussion would occur. Okay, so I will start with early entry. Business and Professions Code Section 5093.5 established early entry in January of this year. Applicants are now able to sit for the CPA exam prior to meeting the educational requirements. The statute states that the applicant must be enrolled in a degree-granting university, and they must be within 180 days of completing the CPA exam educational requirements. And as a quick reminder, the educational requirements include a bachelor's degree or the equivalent in foreign education, 24 units of accounting courses, and 24 units of business-related courses. The statute also requires those approved to sit for early entry to submit satisfactory evidence to the board within 240 days that shows they have met the educational requirements. At its July meeting, the board discussed early entry to the CPA exam, and the board directed staff to include the following 3 items in the future rulemaking package. Number 1, a certificate of enrollment documenting college enrollment, degree conferral or expected conferral date, and courses that are in progress. Submission of transcripts and or foreign credential evaluations at the time of early entry application that document the finished coursework and degree conferral if graduated. And 3, revocation of exam credits for applicants who failed to submit satisfactory evidence within 240 days of application submission, unless they can provide evidence substantiating a reason consistent with those already outlined in CCR Section 7.1. The second topic for the rulemaking package is the CPA evolution exam changes. California Code of Regulation establishes the uniform CPA exam prepared by the AICPA as the CPA licensure exam in California. The new CPA exam based on the CPA evolution licensure model is scheduled to launch in January of 2024. Under the new model, all applicants will be required to pass 3 core test sections. Each applicant will also be required to pass 1 of 3 discipline sections. The disciplines focus on topics that apply to newly licensed CPAs that engage in those areas of practice and are less likely to be encountered by newly licensed CPAs who are not focused in those areas of practice. Regardless of a candidate's chosen discipline, the CPA evolution licensure model leads to a CPA license with rights, privileges, and responsibilities consistent with the present CPA license. In other words, CPA professional practice is not limited by the discipline passed. Please note that the AICPA recently released an exposure draft for the new CPA exam. The exposure draft and exam blueprints included in the exposure draft represent the findings and conclusions of the practice analysis conducted by the AICPA. The exposure draft is being presented at this CPA meeting later today during item 2E. The AICPA is taking comments on the exposure draft, but I do not anticipate there will be large-scale changes made to the finalized licensure model or exam blueprints. If changes are made, I would expect those to be minor and consistent with the proposed regulations you see today. If, however, changes are made that require changes to the proposed regulations, we will bring the regulations back as necessary for reconsideration. Additionally, the CBA was notified that Nasda recommended a consistent credit extension policy that would allow candidates with CPA exam credit on December 31, 2023, to have such credit extended to June 30th, 2025. That notification is included as attachment 3. So that concludes my high-level overview of early entry and the CPA evolution licensure model. Chair Owens, would you like to open it up for clarifying questions on those topics before I begin on the regulation changes?
Yes, let's see if members have any questions.
I did have one question. I know you said that by taking one of the disciplines that you're not going to be limited in any way for the rest of your practice, but when someone does pass that particular discipline, is there going to be some other special credential to highlight to say that I'm, more experienced, or I've passed this part of the exam as opposed to anything else, and so therefore it gives some sort of, a super license in that area?
You're describing something that's often called badging, where you kind of get some kind of recognition. That is not currently planned.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go on.
Okay, so I will provide a summary of the changes in each section of the CCR that is proposed to be amended, repealed, or created. I will periodically pause again to allow for clarifying questions. This presentation does not specifically call out every change to the current regulations. You're probably happy about that, considering the number. Attachments 1 and 2 should be relied on for that purpose. So we'll start with Section 6. The proposed amendments to Section 6 end the administration of the current CPA exam and begin the administration of the new exam. Additionally, the amendments address the changes to the structure of the exam under the CPA evolution licensure model. A practice analysis conducted by AICPA in 2020 acknowledged an emerging area of content, namely that of environmental, social, and governance. The AICPA indicated they would continue to monitor this emerging content. The proposed regulations are drafted so that if AICPA adds additional discipline test sections, for example, environmental, social, and governance, the addition would be made without the requirement to amend regulations. Lastly, edits were made to this section to support the interpretation of other regulatory sections. This was done by defining the content of what is assessed on the exam, as well as adding some definitions for terms that are used across multiple sections. Now I will continue on to Section 7.1. In 2018, the board initiated a rulemaking to amend regulatory text for CCR Section 7.1 to account for continuous testing. Subsequently, DCA Legal Counsel advised that the current statutory framework supported continuous testing as is. Therefore, the board decided to address continuous testing as a cleanup provision later as time permitted. Today, I'm asking that you recommend that the board rescind the 2018 board action to amend CCR Section 7.1 and approve the newly proposed amendments to Section 7.1, which accounts for continuous testing. The amendments to Section 7.1 establish when credit is earned, the prohibition against earning more than one discipline credit, the passing requirement, conditional credit for early entry applicants, and how candidates can request to retake any failed sections. Amendments also outline qualifying events for requesting reestablishment of any lost credit for early entry applicants. Credits are lost when early entry applicants do not supply satisfactory evidence of meeting the educational requirements within 240 days. The amendments to Section 7.1 provide criteria for when credit may be reestablished on a case-by-case basis, consistent with the board action in July. In addition to addressing early entry and CPA evolution, the amendments to this section address changes to the 18-month rolling period that is used to identify when section credit can be used to determine passage of the CPA exam. Nasda has requested that all jurisdictions conform to a common definition for this. Currently, the 18-month period is started on the test date in California. The amendment would not start the rolling 18-month period until the applicant is notified of their score. This is an important change to make at this time because it is anticipated that there will be delays in score reporting with the launch of the new CPA exam. So I will pause there, Chair Owens, for clarifying questions.
Yes. Any questions from members? From members? Okay, I think we're good. We can go on.
Okay, 7.3. 7.3 is a newly proposed section. It addresses the transition to the new CPA exam and the conditions for applicants who begin their CPA exam under the current exam and are still completing sections at the time the new exam launches in January of 2024. Depending on when candidates begin their testing on the current exam, they may have limited opportunities to pass current test sections prior to the launch of the new exam. When the new exam launches, applicants will experience delays in score reporting. In response, Nasda recommends credits held on December 31, 2023 to be extended to June 2025. Nasda believes adopting this common extension policy may reduce confusion and the possibility that applicants will move their credit between jurisdictions in search of the most beneficial policy. This section also includes the Nasda transition policy, namely applicants who have credit for auditing and attestation, financial accounting and reporting, or taxation and regulation on the current exam will not need to take the corresponding new course section. Applicants who have credit for business and environment and concepts on the current exam will not need to take a discipline section. Section 7.3 has an operative date until July 1, 2025. This aligns with a limited time frame. The proposed regulation is necessary and supports the use of an administrative process to repeal the regulation when it is no longer relevant. Moving on to 8.2. Amendments to Section 8.2 clarify differences between what must be submitted along with the initial application for an authorization to test for applicants who have met educational requirements versus those using early entry. This is done by cross-referencing sections 9.2 and 9.3 as appropriate. Amendments also replace gender-specific terminology. Chair Owens, would you like to take any clarifying questions on those sections?
Yes. Members, any questions? No, I think we're good.
Section 9.2. Those amendments include the deletion of subsection 9.2D2. This deletion is cleanup and not related to CPA evolution or early entry. The subsection pertains to a CPA licensure pathway that is no longer operative per statute. Amendments also address the early entry applicants are not required to have completed the educational requirements at the time they apply for the exam. Also, replacement of gender-specific terminology. Section 9.3. This is a newly proposed section. Business and Professions Code Section 5093.5 provides the requirements for early entry. This new CCR section establishes what applicants are required to submit to show they meet those requirements. Specifically, they must submit an application for an authorization to test. They must submit satisfactory evidence of finished coursework, and they must submit a certificate of enrollment form. Those documents must provide evidence that they meet the requirements set forth in statute. The board does not have the authority to waive or modify the requirement that the applicant must show they are within 180 days of meeting the requirement to be granted early entry. Instead, the statute provides the board authority to reestablish lost credit if applicants miss the deadline for submitting evidence they have met the requirements within 240 days. This is detailed in the proposed amendments to Section 7.1. Lastly, the amendments clarify what early entry applicants granted approval to sit for the exam that do not provide the satisfactory evidence of meeting the requirements are no longer allowed to continue to test until they submit evidence of meeting the educational requirements. Section 13. Staff proposed repealing of Section 13 as cleanup. Similar to the recommendations for the removal of subsection 9.2D2, this section is no longer applicable given Pathway 1 became inoperative on January 1, 2014 via statute. Chair Owens, do you want to take any clarifying questions before I finish, or should I continue?
You can keep going.
Okay. If the committee if the committee approves, staff recommend the following: rescind CBA's November 2018 motion and prior proposed text for CCR Section 7.1, approve the proposed regulatory language presented in Attachment 1, approve the proposed certificate of enrollment presented in Attachment 2, direct staff to submit the text and form to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing if one is requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking to amend CCR Section 6, 7.1, 8.2, 9.2, and adopt proposed regulations at CCR Section 7.3 and 9.3, and repeal CCR Section 13. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you for walking through that for us. Any questions from members before we move for a motion? Yes.
Oh, my mic's already on. In the section where you're allowing for, it's a small thing, but where you're allowing for the, what is it, credit for past exam sections may be extended, that section, sorry, it's where you're giving, it's section 7.1E, where you're giving allowances for certain kinds of events, and then it shows the proof. Is that just the CBA will determine whether or not those conditions have been met?
So when we, I think you're looking at 7.1E as, which includes things like death of a family member and that type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we look at those as on a case-by-case basis. That is something we already do. What we're adding to that is we would include early entry applicants that have missed the 240 in that realm. It's common. I mean, this is something we do, and we look at things like, when did that occur? If it was, relatively close to, when the 240-day period ended, how much time might you need? So we do have discretion in how long the extension is also, but it is common work for us already.
All right. Any other questions? No. And do you have a motion to adopt staff's recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I move that the CPC recommend to the CBA that we adopt recommendations as presented in CPC item 3, page 9 of 10 and 10 of 10. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. So let's open up for public comment. Any comments from people here in Sacramento at the CBA?
Actually,
Yeah.
I actually had a question. Are we able to take all of this in one motion? I mean, I know it's broad, so yeah. Are we? Yeah. I mean, particularly the rescinding and then also the rulemaking. I mean, it seems like we should take the rescinding of the section first as a separate motion and then the rulemaking, but no.
So I believe this type of motion was designed by the regulations attorney in the regulations division, but I have absolutely no problem with breaking up the motion and handling however the motion is made section separately.
Just question or process, defer to the
Either
advice?
one will work.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. So let's open for public comment. Any comments from people here in the room? No. Moderator, can you open for public comment?
The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen, and type, "I would like to make a comment" in the text field, and make sure it goes to all panelists and click send. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's call for the vote, Ms. Reed.
Ariel Pay,
Yes.
Joe Rosenbaum,
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens,
Yes.
Evangeline Ward,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
and Nancy Corrigan.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item 4, Mr. Frenzella.
Thank you, Chair Owens. Good morning, members. So the purpose of agenda item 4 is to provide the CBA an opportunity to initiate a rulemaking to adopt regulations regarding the sale, transfer, and discontinuance of a licensee's practice. The CBA originally approved some proposed regulatory text on this topic back in 2017. And the CBA provided for a 45-day public comment period, which originally concluded in mid-September 2021. Also conducted a public hearing on the proposed regulations a couple days later in September of 2021. But in addition to the requirements outlined in the Administrative Procedure Act, the legislature requires the CBA to provide a copy to all licensees of proposed changes to the rules of professional conduct 30 days prior to any public hearing. And while staff took steps to coordinate the notification required under that particular statutory section, there was a mailing issue that arose. So to ensure proper notification and comply with the statute, staff provided for another public comment period and held a second public hearing. And that second comment period concluded in January of 2022. So over the course of the various public comment periods, the CBA received comments from over 70 individuals. And the comments included objection to the originally proposed 7-year retention period, method of notification, concerns with the 90-day notice period for waiting for clients' objections, and concerns regarding notice to clients impacting value of the practice. So in order to allow staff time to evaluate and give proper consideration to the comments and to work with other stakeholders, including Cal CPA, in addressing the feedback to ensure the final regulatory text provides an effective framework for the sale, transfer, or discontinuance of a licensee's practice, the CBA approved a motion to withdraw the initial rulemaking package at its January meeting. Since then, staff have been working in collaboration with DCA to revise the proposed regulatory language and have discussed the proposed changes with Cal CPA. So the regulatory text proposed addresses many of the concerns raised in the comments and incorporates changes to remain consistent with language that was originally adopted in the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct. So on page 4 of your materials, staff have highlighted the various changes. These include removing the terms files throughout the text, as the CBA's existing regulatory terminology considers records to include similar documents that the AICPA would refer to as files. We've proposed modifications to allow licensees to send a written notice regarding the sale, transfer, or discontinuance of practice by various forms of communication, rather than limiting the requirement to first-class mail. Staff have proposed modifications to allow licensees the ability to keep the notice of sale or transfer of practice in either a digital or paper format. We're proposing an amendment to reduce the time a licensee must retain the notice of sale or transfer of a practice and client's consent or objection from 7 to 4 years. Staff are proposing an amendment to reduce how long a licensee must retain client files from the date of sale, transfer, and discontinuance of the licensee's practice from 7 to 4 years, or if the client's files include audit documentation, then they must comply with the 7-year requirement or a longer period of time as provided for in CBA regulations section 68.2 and 68.3. We're proposing an amendment to define electronic transmission, and we're proposing adding sections and subsections to clarify what the CBA considers client records. Additionally, we note that Cal CBA provided some feedback on this, and one of the suggestions pertained to the proposed regulation was a suggestion to replace successor licensee with another firm, person, another person, firm, or entity, or successor firm to ensure consistency with the AICPA Code of Conduct. This was brought to light in the context of a CPA may sell his or her practice or their practice to a non-CPA. For example, a tax practice could be sold to an enrolled agent or a tax preparer. So rather than limiting it to another licensee to be able to comply with this section, it needed to be broadened. So staff addressed Cal CBA's feedback by updating the proposed regulatory language to replace successor licensee with, quote, another person as defined by section 5035 of the Business and Professions Code. Per Business and Professions Code 5035, persons include individuals, partnership, firm, association, limited liability company, or corporation, unless otherwise provided. Staff determined that this existing regulatory definition of person was sufficient to address the concerns. So in attachment 4, it presents the regulatory language previously adopted by the CBA back in 2017, noted in single underline, with the proposed new changes to the regulatory text in double underline and double strike through. And attachment 5 presents the regulatory text that we're proposing today in single underline for purposes of initiating a rulemaking. So staff is recommending that CBA approves the regulatory text in attachment 5. And if the CBA agrees with that recommendation, staff advised the CBA or this committee to make a motion to approve the proposed regulatory text for sections 54.3 and 54.4 as presented in attachment 5. Direct staff to submit the text to the Director of DCA and to the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review. And if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing. And if no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period or during the public hearing, authorize the executive officer to take all necessary steps to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations at sections 54.3 and 54.4 as noticed. At this point, I'd like to turn discussions back over to Chair Owens, and I'll do my best to answer members' questions.
Thank you, Mr. Frantella. Are there any questions from members? All right, seeing none, does anybody want to make a motion to approve staff's recommendation?
I move to adopt staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, so we will open up for public comment. Is there anyone here at CBA headquarters that would like to make a comment? All right, seeing none. Moderator, can you open up the WebEx for public comment?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of a square, type I would like to make a comment in the text field that appears, and make sure it goes to all panelists and click send. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Reed, can we call for the vote?
Joe Rosenbaum,
Yes.
Evangeline Ward,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Dee Dee Owens,
Yes.
and Ariel Pay.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right, moving on to agenda item 5, which is agenda items for the next meeting. Any agenda items or comments from the board about agenda items for the next meeting? Okay, seeing none, we should open up for public comment. Any comments from the public here in Sacramento on agenda items for the next meeting? Seeing none, we'll go to WebEx. Moderator, can you open the line for public comment?
Yes, the Q&A is now open. Instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click that question mark inside of the square, type "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A? Chair, this is the moderator. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A? This is the moderator. Chair, are you able to hear me?
Hi, moderator. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please.
It might be, okay.